A few moments later.
Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. And today we're going to talk about seedlings. Now, if you've been following us for a while, you know that we have had some serious challenges with seedlings this spring. And that's really pretty unusual for us. We normally don't have much of a challenge. Henry and I have been talking about this a lot. And I wanted to share what I did when this whole thing went down. These really big plants like this is a husk cherry. And this is actually a rescue. In other words, it grew randomly in another pot that had something else growing in it. And rather than destroy it or just let it die, I decided to harvest out a couple of them. So there's actually more than one around here that were done that way. The goal was to be able to plant these in the greenhouse. We still haven't 100% decided whether we're going to do that or not, but we'll know that in the next week or so. The reason we wanted to plant them in the greenhouse, I'm looking for bugs to make sure that we haven't acquired any in here. Even in the house, sometimes bugs do get in. The reason we had wanted to plant these in the greenhouse is because they are so susceptible to problems with bean and potato beetles. They wind up just getting munched to death. They're also very, I don't want to say they're fragile, but they're more fragile than some plants are. And when you get a bad hailstorm, they just get the stuff knocked out of them. So it's better if we can keep them under cover in some way. Graze-on goes on there. Supposedly it doesn't hurt the animals that are grazing on it, but it will kill off the broadleaf plants and improve the grazing. Okay, so supposedly, and I don't think that the jury's in on this one yet. Supposedly, it doesn't hurt the animals that are eating it. Well, who usually grazes on this? Either horses or cattle. Either one of those sets of manure can also be used in compost. The higher you are up the food chain, the more your body concentrates the chemicals that you're eating. So the horses and cows eat the grass, and when they poo out, they have that chemical in their poo. Now, it's concentrated. Maybe they've taken a big bunch of grass and they've shrunk it down to this, but all the chemicals are still in there. So now this little pile of poo that you've got has, yards worth of chemicals concentrated down into it, and it gets tossed in with your compost, and yeah, it's in your compost. So when you run a compost pile and you've used manure, you have to be careful about where that manure came from. And to be honest, I don't think most farmers are going to be honest about it. And that's a terrible thing for me to say. I think that there's a lot of oblivious behavior on the part of these compost makers and stuff like that. They should be testing every batch of straw that comes in, every batch of manure that comes in, and the final product to make sure that it doesn't have anything like that in it. Now, what are we personally doing about it? We have used an assortment of bagged dirt in the past. Our favorite is actually the mushroom compost because that's expended stuff. In other words, that compost was actually used to grow mushrooms, and at some point they decide that the nutrition level in there is not high enough anymore, so they sell it. My theory, and I haven't done any research on this, is that that process of using something that's actually been used to grow something before is probably about as safe as you're going to get if you're having to buy compost. If you're buying mushroom compost that has manure added to it, there's always the risk that that manure could have something in it. I don't know. I have used mushroom compost with manure in it, and knock on wood, so far I've been lucky on that. But I'll tell you what, after the number of people I've run across this year who have had problems with germination, you know, it makes you wonder who you can trust and who you can't. These guys are nasturtiums. They're a flower. And I'm going to be putting those out in the bed. I'm going to cover it with a box made of hardware cloth. We also have the golden zucchini. I can't see the label on that one. Thai basil. Tasty Jane. Some of these are elongated because they are like viney sort of things, like nasturtiums. Some of these need to go out pretty quickly because they're getting a little leggy. But some of these are naturally leggy, as in they're cucumbers. So Tasty Jade is a cucumber. This is a Tasty Jade also. To go back to the testing it yourself theory of life, we do plan to do an actual physical test with some of the previously used seed starting soil, to see if there's definitely something we can track to that as an issue, but not right now. To be honest, I just didn't feel like I had the time. These are butternut, golden zucchini, Hannah's Choice, that's a cantaloupe, Hannah's Choice, another cantaloupe. And then we do have a few tomato plants in here, some regular basil. This is also regular basil. This is thyme. This guy just came up this morning. This is a Y-Star patty pan. I actually was beginning to wonder if they were going to come up. So we may very well do an actual test later this fall. But for right now, we decided that changing the seed starting mix was the best, most sensible, and the most timely. We had just bought it. It was there. It was available. We had the seeds. We were just going to do it. And the result was very good. I would say 100% germination on some things, 80% on other things. But that beats the heck out of 0%, which is what we got on a bunch of stuff. The most sensitive vegetables that I am aware of in terms of germination with chemicals like that present are legumes, so peas and beans, things like that. And when we tested our straw bales to make sure that there was no chemical residue in there that would impact our crops if we were to use it as a straw bale garden, that's what we grew in it. We took some straw and we soaked it in water, and we used that to germinate peas. We decided we were not going to do a giant tomato grow festival this summer because, to be honest, we have only used like 1 or 2 containers of the literally couple of hundred that I put up last summer in terms of tomato sauce. So we don't need a huge amount of tomato sauce, and my anticipation is if we get some decent tomatoes at the end of the summer, I will make some tomato sauce. But there's not the feeling that we have this huge pressure to create a monster collection of tomato sauce this year. For us this spring, starting seedlings, we didn't really feel like we had the time to play. And that's what I won't say that was playing when we were doing the straw test, but we had a time there. We had bought the straw in the fall. We were not going to be using it until the spring. Early spring, before we would have normally planted anything out in the garden, we tested the straw to make sure it was safe. If you are doing last-minute delivery on your straw, if you're doing last-minute delivery on your soil, you can't afford the time, sometimes, to fool around with testing. So in this case, we didn't have the time. It was either make it or break it. You gotta plant it now. We've got to do it now. We don't have any more time to waste. And it has worked. We're taking it a little easier than usual for a couple of reasons. One is we've got a lot of other projects going on the homestead. We're working on the electric system. We're building some new beds. This is our first year since the COVID epidemic started that we are going to events. But in this case, this year we're keeping it simple. We're doing events that we're already familiar with, that we have an established reputation at, and that we have a very good chance of at least breaking even, if not doing better than that. So that's where we are right now. We have a whole stack of seedlings. Some of them are giganticus, like the sausage cherry, and some of them are teeny, like let's see this guy here. That's basil. So the basil's little, but it's doing well. There's some bigger things in here, like some of the zucchinis and stuff are now, getting up there in size. But we have success. My main effort lately has been preparing for the next event. And around and about that, I'm also trying to get some garden in. And I have to decide where some of these, I have to do a plot. What I'll do is I'll actually I'll make a little map on paper. I know how big the beds are, and I'm going to decide which one of these cucurbits goes in which bed, and what happens next. The plan had been to put in 2 new beds this spring, and to be honest, it didn't happen. We have the room cleared. We could probably in an afternoon pull together 1 new bed, but I do have 2 beds that are completely cleaned up, completely refurbished in terms of soil and all that stuff. So I'm actually going to count my things here and see, do I need to put the other 2 beds in? Long term, we will. So when you are gardening, I recommend this phrase above just about all others. After this, therefore, because of this. No, that's not logic. It's not scientific thinking. It's a natural tendency of the human mind to want to understand what's gone wrong. But you can't always say this is what it is unless you have scientific proof. Or at least you can eliminate as many variations as possible. For instance, this spring, we were blaming some of the damage that we had in the yard on squirrels. Now, we do have squirrel problems. In fact, I eliminated one of them just the other day, and I know we have at least 3 more in the area, if not 4, that should be eliminated if we want to have a semi-safe garden. My preference would be to have a wonderful force field around the entire garden so that everyone could live peacefully outside and we could live peacefully inside. My goal is still to try and get all the husk cherries into the greenhouse, the cucumbers into the greenhouse. We have to make some decisions on the tomatoes, and I had to sit down with Henry on that one. When we thought we had squirrel problems, the first thing I did was stick a game camera out there. And that is what I recommend people always do. I hear people all the time going, what's killing my peppers? What's killing my this? What's killing my that? If I can't see the damage, I don't know what it is. Even if I can see the damage, okay, it's got cut marks. It's something with teeth. Okay, that narrows it down to something smaller than a bear and something larger than a grasshopper. But in an environment that is dry and dusty and pretty desperate in terms of the rats and every other rodent and critter that lives out there, they are not repelled by the usual things. Even my sister who lives in Virginia will tell you, these people will say, oh, they don't like this particular plant. She's like, yeah, not in my yard. They love it. They don't just like it, they love it, So it's a challenge to find things that your local critters will not eat. Now, I can fence out rabbits. Knock on wood, we've been able to fence out deer using electric fence. And I mean heavy-duty electric fence. And a double fence. But rats, the only way you can fence out rats and mice is if you make a really rat and mouse tight environment. And that requires small hold fencing like a hardware cloth. Not an easy solution. But if I hadn't had that field camera, I wouldn't have known it was the rats. I'd have been running around out there shooting squirrels and blaming them for everything in the world when I was having no effect at all on the predators that were actually eating my vegetables. So we still have some thinking to do, but my current thinking tells me I don't need to build the other 2 beds right now. We'll see. We'll see. You'll know as soon as we do, pretty much. But I did want to share the fact that I have some very nice looking basil here. 2 different pots with a whole bunch of plants in it. We love basil. And one of the things I really want to do is grab a couple of these little guys and put them someplace where they might make it into the fall. So what I have to do is I have to decide whether I want to try and grow some of this stuff in the greenhouse rather than in the yard. We have grown thyme outside, and we haven't had a problem with that either. So I really want to try and reestablish my thyme out in the garden. I've got one scraggly little plant that I'm trying to keep alive out there. We used to have monster thyme bushes, and in the process of renovating and repairing beds a couple of years ago, some of the stuff just plain was killed off accidentally, and we lost it. So I want it back because it's really nice. One of our goals is to always have as many of our herbs available in the garden. I don't know if you've priced herbs lately, but they are scary expensive. And I'll tell you, the more I see with problems of contamination with herbicides and all the other things, the more I like knowing exactly where things like my herbs and stuff come from. So get yourself game cameras. And don't get just one. I talked with someone else on YouTube the other day who said, well, something's eating my peppers. And I said, get a game camera. Oh, we've got one. We've got one. We're using it to monitor predators for our chickens. Okay. I know this stuff costs money. I have spent the money. I did not enjoy spending the money, but you could get 4-packs. You can even get bigger packs than that sometimes through Amazon. I get nothing from Amazon. But I'll tell you what, having a 4-pack means I can set up different cameras in different locations. I can be watching for predators. I can be watching to see what's chewing on my vegetables, the whole 9 yards. I can set it up so I know if I've got trespassers. That's a really important concept. In most rural areas, trespassers are a big deal. You know, is someone coming in and stealing your stuff when you're not around? Are they even just scoping the place out, checking to see what kind of security you have on your house, checking to see what you've got in terms of equipment that they could pick up and run with? Important to know. We had a couple of other things. We had, I think, one Hossinator and some Amanda Orange that did well out of the second batch, but all the other stuff was 100% fail. So what I did on this batch was just plant what we were looking for. And literally, we just sat there and went, how many plants do we want? Okay, we want this many. If we want 6, I'm going to plant 8 seeds. Okay? That's how we decided. We decided we had to have a couple of spares, but not too many. I can always give them away. I'm sure I have people I can give plants away to if I really can't squish them in, and usually I can squish them in someplace. We're not running a full garden at this point. So there'll be some place to put things. But until next time, bye. And don't forget, keep on brainstorming, because we obviously are. You need to too.